Joining us live now is Behyad Jafari, CFO of the Electric Vehicle Council. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. I know you've been following this all very closely. So just tell us, how do you expect that this proposed fuel efficiency standard will actually work in practical terms?
Well, on one hand, of course, we have the government announcing a discussion paper over the next 6 weeks to get a range of views on how they think that this should work, but we're not starting from scratch here. What we know is that every developed country in the world, except for Australia and Russia, already have these standards in place. The USA's had them in place since 1976, so there's quite a lot of pretty strong paths for us to follow. The big challenge about these standards is that because we don't have them in place, car makers tell us they prioritise other markets because they do have standards. Every other country does have standards. So that sends a pretty clear signal for us. We not only need to start implementing these standards, but they need to be in line with major markets around the rest of the world.
Okay, so has that led to supply issues when it comes to EVs and what can be done about that going forward?
Yeah, what it's led to so far is certainly supply issues for electric vehicles. I mean, we've got some examples of some award-winning electric vehicles that came to Australia last year. Car companies were able to get about 750 units of a certain electric vehicle that came into our market. They found that they had 30,000 customers lined up waiting to buy that car. So when it comes to a national electric vehicle strategy, the lowest hanging fruit is for the people who already want to buy an electric car, let's make one available to them so that they can actually buy one. It's about giving customers access to the choices that they've already made. After that, of course, there are a range of other initiatives to address around charging in the built environment, like apartments, public charging complexes, but certainly encouraging more people to buy electric cars and drive them will get a lot more investment right across the sector.
So just looking at those supply issues, if I put in an order today, what's the average wait time that somebody is looking at to get a new electric vehicle? And what average cost are we talking here? Do we expect the price of EVs will drop substantially over the coming years?
Yeah, come with price first. I mean, today electric vehicles are in that mid $40,000 price range. At the minimum, Australian new car sales are usually average around $50,000. So we're sort of getting there on price. Of course, we want cheaper vehicles too. We do know next year something like $35,000 electric vehicles are coming. The big thing for us isn't just to make sure that the cars come here, though, but that they come here in sufficient numbers to be able to satisfy all the demands that's already there of people who already want to buy these vehicles. The other point that I'd make is that, of course, these standards aren't just about electric vehicles. The other thing that they do is they make petrol and diesel vehicles cheaper to run. So if you've got an audience member out there who drives a diesel ute, for instance, and they want to continue driving a diesel ute, the outcome of that means that you'll pay less for diesel to keep running the new version of that vehicle, because it is a standard that applies to new vehicles in future years. And that's why it's so important that we get this right, because what we found, and I participated in this process with the previous government, what they found was that the average ute driver would save $600 a year in fuel. By not having those standards in place, that means Australian families are paying $600 more every year for fuel than they need to be, if only we had standards that are in line with markets like the USA, EU, even New Zealand, our neighbours who have these standards.
You touched on the challenges surrounding infrastructure earlier. What do we know about what the government is actually planning on that front in terms of ensuring that we actually have the infrastructure needed to support that level of a greater uptake of EVs?
Yeah, from the government's perspective, they have committed $500 million to the Driving the Nation Fund. So those are in co-investment grants along with the private sector. So they will fund something like half of the cost of building a charger. Those are particularly looking at, for instance, in regional areas or in very remote areas where it's difficult to make the commercial aspects of building one of these chargers stack up, to make sure that those areas don't miss out on these charges. I think much more importantly than just what the government can contribute, though, there are already a number of companies across Australia building out charge point networks right across the country. They have plans of building those out in the hundreds across the country. To be able to stimulate that investment to go further, to start seeing the billions of dollars invested for thousands of chargers across the country, you won't be surprised to hear this. Much like a petrol station developer, what they need is customers, or certainty that those customers will come in future years. And that's why, again, when we go back to things like fuel efficiency standards, what every company sees is that there is very strong demand there among Australian consumers for electric vehicles. Supply has been the big question mark. So if you're setting a future projection for how many electric vehicles we'll have on our roads, a lot of that comes down to, well, just how many will arrive here. Will get on boats from overseas and come here instead of going to markets like the USA and the EU. And that's exactly what we're trying to address with this.
And the situation as it stands today, what percentage of cars on the road are actually electric vehicles?
Well, in terms of new vehicles sold, something like 6.5% of new vehicles sold every year now are electric vehicles. But really, and this helps demonstrate just how impactful that supply question is, really we don't use that at all to determine how many people want to buy electric vehicles. Every electric vehicle that arrives on Australian shores is sold out months before it gets here. In fact, in most cases, customers are waiting something like 4, 6, 12 months to get a hold of an electric vehicle, and many of the ones that have arrived, the entire allocation of that vehicle that was due to come to Australia gets sold out within an hour of being made available, whether that's online or through dealerships. So again, that big challenge for us is how do we turn that 6% come closer to where the rest of the world is around 20%. Well, quite a lot of that is customers who already want to buy electric vehicles just need access to them. So we can increase that choice and make more electric vehicles, particularly more affordable electric vehicles, available to Australian consumers by adopting the standards that are in place in other countries where drivers there already get to enjoy the benefits of electric vehicles that are both cheaper to buy and then, of course, far cheaper to run.
Yeah, we clearly still have a long way to go. Behyad, Jafari, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.